interviewing him about becoming a director, but a lot of it was he just was like, well, I just said I'm the director. You're like, how'd you become a director? He's like, well, I had an idea for a film and I showed up on set and I said, all right, I'm the director and this is what everybody else is doing. And nobody appointed him director. It was just, and I think that there's a lot of that in like leadership. Yvonne and I were talking about this week. I was rewatching Band of Brothers, which, have you ever seen that? It's fantastic.
Well, I mean, is there the movie and there's the show?
No, I think it was Saving Private Ryan was the movie.
Okay.
And then after that, Tom Hanks made
the
miniseries,
which has the dude from Office Space.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I was trying to think who you're talking about.
Yeah.
And it has an amazing cast.
I've never actually watched it, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. No, just watching that. And like when I was in high school, I went to military camp for a summer and I really enjoyed it actually. And I did really well there. Like, I remember sitting around when we first got there, they had different roles you had to do or whatever. And it was like, well, who wants to be the platoon leader? And like, I'm like, I guess I will,
Yeah.
just cause I kind of figure I'm always, as a band leader too, I'm always, if I'm going to do something, I think I just naturally, I want to lead. I don't know why. It's not like I want to tell people what to do. It's more like, well, if I'm going to do it, I might as well like all in, let me, at least, I don't want to, I guess if I didn't want to do it, I just wouldn't do it. Like 100% out.
Yeah.
Versus if I'm going to do it, well, I guess I'll lead it. That way, at least if it's going in a direction, I have some sort of say in the matter or influence in that. But then I was saying, I have asthma. So like all the different recruiting offices were out there like all week and like working with us.
Yeah.
And then I talked to the recruiter and they're like, you have any medical things? I'm like, oh, just asthma. And they're like, oh, no, you can't. I was like, can I even just fake it? And he's like, well, they're going to put you in a bunker and they're going to tear gas you. So if you have an asthma attack, they're going to find out
catch that,
and you'll probably die. And I just, no military. But I think I would have done well in the military. Not saying like watching Band of Brothers. I'm not saying I would ever want to go to war. Like, I don't think that like that's awful.
Right,
I definitely would not like that. But what I would like is I think that I always just, maybe you have a perspective being somebody that worked with me for a long time, but even like in high school, I never got in fights. I never got beat. Like I was just more of a political minded person.
Yeah.
And so I was always kind of the person that could maneuver socially wherever I went.
Yeah.
And I think that my life would have been a really totally different trajectory, obviously musician, military, but I wonder, like, I don't know, maybe I would have been more disciplined at a younger age. I don't know. What would my life have looked like if Dante, right out of high school, enlisted, went to the Marines or something?
Yeah. Marines specifically, we're talking like right around 01. So war on terror starts.
It would have been, I would have gone,
that's like,
definitely been deployed.
A buddy of mine joined the Navy shortly before 9/11. So we hadn't, the 90s, we didn't really have a whole lot of skirmishes to speak of.
Desert Storm.
Well, but that was pretty small. And, as far as the American public's concerned, is like, well, we just went over there, kicked some butt, took some names, flugged the flag around. That was that. So later in the 90s, when you say, I'm going to join the Navy, it's like, oh, you're going to ride around on a boat. They'll pay for your college and you'll be an accountant one day or something, And then 9/11 happened. It was one of those like, you might have to go do some stuff, man.
Yeah.
Him being the role he was and being in the Navy, he ended up not having any kind of like battle stuff. But when you mention like going into the Marines, some of the guys you listen to, like on the Jocko podcast, they'll say, "Oh man, I thought I'd missed Desert Storm. I thought that was my window." they're like 5-10 years later, I was over there all the time.
Meaning like that they were really looking forward to it.
Yeah, the guys that Jocko tends to have on are like either special forces guys or just, infantry higher level, whether it be Army, Marines, or special forces like Navy. But it's pretty common for those guys, particularly the guys that are like our age, to say, I got in the military and figured I'd missed the window. and then 9/11 happened, and I got to see
a lot of
plenty.
windows.
Yeah.
I shouldn't laugh. It's terrible. I don't know.
Well, the way these particular guys talk about it in a positive light, they wanted to get to be a part of it, But I thought that like, well, yeah, I would have enjoyed like, yeah, I do pretty well at making my bed and following rules, and
I think that when you're younger too, I would have felt differently at that age too. Like being 39, having young sons myself.
mm-hmm.
You grow up playing G.I. Joe, watching movies. You think, but I don't know. I think the wars, we got to stop the wars. It's just,
it sure seems like.
And even in hindsight, well, back then, weapons of mass destruction is what we were told. And it was, I remember, when that was going down early 2000s, it was go get them,
Mm-hmm.
And then to me, it's shocking now that there's no accountability whatsoever for any of it. That you just say, well, whoops.
The only thing that makes me feel slightly better is we've been doing this for a long time. And what I mean by that is like the accountability has been pretty limited, and we've gone into a lot of conflicts with way too much hubris and it seems like the story is the same over and over again. Like right now, I told you I listened to that Vietnam book. Now I'm listening to the Korean War book, and it's like just the story as old as time. The American people get told, hey, communism, guys, it's spreading like wildfire, and if we don't get over there and snuff this out, and believe us, we'll snuff it out in no time. So the American people are like, yeah, get over there, get those commies taken care of. And we get over there, and believe it or not, these insurgents have pretty strong ideology they don't want to be fooled around with. And it turns out to be a bigger pickle than we thought it would be. And the guys who sold us this bill of goods kind of shrugged their shoulders.
Did you ever listen to that old Eisenhower speech when he's leaving office about the military-industrial complex?
I know about it. I've never actually listened to it.
Give it a listen.
Yeah.
World. I was about to say America. World. Yeah, I think it's been referenced a lot, but I think a lot of people have said it's the most important speech given in the 20th century because it was him predicting the rise of all these wars and just the continually. I mean, my gosh, I don't know. We have lots of podcasts to do about it because there's a lot of conspiracies wrapped up in virtually every American conflict that we've ever been involved in. Right. You could go back all the way to the Civil War and the conspiracy to kill Lincoln. And
I know.
Which is
that's not one I'd ever even heard of at all, except for when we were what was that? The Wagon the Moon Doggy.
Yeah.
McGowan makes a reference to it, and I'm like, Lincoln? What is this?
Yeah.
So yeah, I haven't looked into that at all.
Well, that's an open conspiracy. I mean, they were conspiring to kill Lincoln.
The thing with these wars and the conspiracy theories wrapped around them is it's such a touchy subject because of like guys like we're talking about that sign up to be in the infantry to protect freedom, spread democracy, all of the altruistic, legitimate reasons you should want to get in the military. A lot of those guys tend to get real prickly when you bring these things up. I think they view it as an attack on them, which is not. It's not your intention. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think too, there's a lot. I mean, I get it. There's a lot of effort from the military to like. You can't. People have jobs to do. You know what I mean? So. You have a job to do, and that kind of dissenting opinion can like cause. Think about like mutiny. You know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. Like where I get it. Like if it's my job to be the Marine, it's not my job to question.
Right.
Why an order has been given down, and also to be very. You're just going to naturally be very careful about any. Accusations of, conspiracies or any questioning because how quickly would that unravel your job and what you're supposed to do? And I think the only answer is to have, the press, which is quickly disappearing, but that's traditionally what it's been is like, you have the military's doing their thing, and we have enemies around the world, and we're fighting our conflicts, and we have some sort of independent press that kind of keeps eyes on it, and that's just non-existent now. So it's I mean, even with the Ukraine war right now, and just finding, you can find dissenting opinions, but as far as the mainstream media is concerned, no, there's talking points, and this is the way it's supposed to be, and that's pretty much it. So where's the balance? I think that maybe independent internet journalists are that balance. It's just they don't have the influence that mainstream media has. And but it's quickly growing. I mean, there's a lot of people that most of the news that I get from alternative news sources. I don't know about you, but I get it from, I don't even listen to Fox or CNN.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just dumb. I mean, I did listen to Fox when Tucker was on, but I wouldn't listen to Fox. I would actually just look at clips. You know what I mean? Like sure. I'd listen to things I thought was interesting, but if I didn't, if it wasn't that, I wouldn't listen to it.
Yeah, I suppose their reach will deteriorate as our parents' generation dwindles. Because when you, like you just said, I listen to alternative news sources, which to anybody that is a Fox or CNN viewer, they're like, oh, alternative, how trustworthy is that? You know what I mean? Whereas like traditional media, this Scientology research that we were doing, I watched an interview with Ted Koppel, and I was like, man, Ted Koppel is so cool. And it's just partly the contrast of you don't see newscasters like that anymore. Like he gives Miscavige a fair shot to rebut a lot of these comments, but Koppel asks some really well thought out questions. Whereas, cut to present day, you watch a snippet of Fox or CNN, and, no matter the side you're on, you can see pretty clearly that, like, we're going to do a hit piece on whoever this guest is. We're going to fire a bunch of questions at them, not give them much time to answer, and then we're going to go to break,
Well, if you listen to this podcast and you understand Operation Mockingbird, then you understand that that's all been in place for a very long time. Right, yeah. And the idea of there being an independent or some sort of truly objective news source in America, I don't think that's existed since before the Vietnam War, my opinion.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say I think after World War II, probably a lot of things started getting put in place. Yeah. And maybe even rightly so. If it's like, sure. Dude, the world almost ended. We kind of need to stop that from ever happening again. And maybe it started out with good intentions, but yeah, it's interesting to see where we are now, where people make fun of me sometimes, but it's like, it kind of doesn't matter what we're talking about. I can go, do you know the CIA actually did this? Yeah. I can always trace it back to, and I almost find myself going like, I know I tell you, like, I know it's all going back, but if you understand Operation Mockingbird, you understand that Anderson Cooper is CIA, and he always has been, and everything that he's saying is a mouthpiece of the CIA.
Yeah.
So anyway, before we get too down into this, we're going to talk about Scientology. Welcome to the podcast, everybody. We've been having a great response, great time doing these. And if you enjoy the podcast, please like, subscribe, share, do all the stuff to get us out there, or just listen and enjoy it, or, criticize us, do whatever you want. I don't care. Yeah. We did a podcast a while back on, we did like 5 on the moon landing. And so I know you had some pictures, which were really, I want to see them, but it's really interesting you would bring it because somebody had the nerve to give me this.
What is this?
It's a very nice gift. It's a Omega Speedmaster watch, but it's not just, it's the Moon Swatch. So it's a collaboration between Omega and Swatch, and they made replicas of the watches that we supposedly used on the moon landing. And it's a really cool watch with on the back it's got, they made a whole series for the different planets, but it's got the a map of the moon on the back. I don't know if you can see that or not.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
Are you comfortable saying who got that for you?
My buddy Ryan. He didn't buy it for me, actually. He's a good guy, but he had one, and I think something was broken.
It's still.
And he sent it back, and they both repaired it and sent him a new one. So then he was like, "Oh, I have two. You want one?"
That's a cool. I mean,
it's even
cool
though we
story,
faked it, it's still.
But
I'm just kidding.
Makes for a hell of a watch, though.
No, it is I mean, I think I've always wanted an Omega, but the idea that it's made out of, because the temperature of the moon is so extreme.
That's right.
It's made out of a special material that would have been different than the metal and different than the. It's actually a cheaper watch, but it's because it's
really
meant to survive.
It's like a durability watch,
It's not a fashion watch. It's
if you were going to a formal event on the moon, that's not necessarily the watch that you would be wearing.
So what did you? But you happen to bring lunar stuff as well.
Maybe a picture of that watch is in these photos that I brought.
Let me see if I got it.
So these are.
Oh my gosh, where'd you find these?
My wife brought me these from her school. One of her teacher friends was going to get rid of them. These are. Let's see. Yeah, the U.S. government, NASA issued these.
There is no blast crater under that guy.
So I think this was late 70s that NASA just gave out a lot of these pictures to public education.
Oh, I bet they did.
Yeah. So I think my favorite, I mean, I thought you might want to pick one or two to put up on the wall. Probably the one on top of the no blast crater is like, I didn't.
That's the best.
It wasn't so much the no blast crater that stood out to me. My wife, like your wife, I imagine, and a lot of our friends' wives are not conspiracy theorists. And, you just start digging a little bit out from under them and they start to fall down the rabbit hole. And she gives me this stack of photos and she's like, you're right. This is way too clear of a photo for someone to take with gloves on. So that's the one, like that one where he's climbing out of the ladder. Yeah, not only there's no blast crater, but it's just, wow, this is a really well composed photograph.
I'm looking at all the, what are the cross? Oh my God, I found one right here. So that'd be one that they were talking about. You'll notice in these cross marks, that one goes behind the lunar.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
As a composite.
Yeah, right. So the modules composite over the hash.
Kind of seems like it. I could be wrong, but that does look shady.
I just like this one here.
He's not supposed to be in space, is he?
No, I just like the picture of the guy.
Who is that?
This is let's see, does it say who the model is? It's mostly the focus of this image is it's a manned maneuvering unit. It's a one-man self-contained gas-propelled backpack, snaps onto the space suit's portable life support system. So this is mostly just to highlight the tech of the era. Kind of like if you were like shopping in Sears catalog for your spacesuit, this seems like the picture that would be in it.
I always wanted one.
Yeah. He doesn't have the watch on that I can tell. Of course, his sleeve's over his wrist, but...
Yeah, I don't know if they wore this exact watch or not, but...
Oh, and this one.
They did do one for each. It might have been under his suit, too.
Did you know there was... I mean, your last name is Schmitz, but did you know there was astronaut Schmidt?
Yeah.
Yeah, here he is.
Which one is it? Harrison Schmidt?
Harrison.
He's the one that I told
Jack
you about
Schmidt.
Oh, that's Jack, not Harrison?
Well, I mean, it's his nickname is Jack.
Oh, yes, he's the one that Norm
Same
Macdonald
guy.
was joking about.
Oh, that's the...
That he said, Harrison Schmidt.
What does the guy got to do?
And he said, he walked on the moon and you don't even know his name. Nobody... What does that guy got to do to be famous? There's very few people that go, where's the moon? Right there.
You got that Remember Tusco shirt? I think another campaign you got to go on is...
That's a good idea.
Never forget
Jack
Schmidt.
Jack Schmidt.
Is it Jack Schmidt? Right.
Harrison Jack Schmidt.
The final astronaut. Lunar astronaut.
Yeah, I can't believe that they don't even care. No one remembers.
Well...
How quickly the interest of the American people faded.
We got on to MTV and cell phones and... Now we're on to TikTok.
So tonight or this morning, wherever you are, we're going to talk about Scientology. Now, preface this with, I'm not an expert in Scientology. I'm just a guy on the internet
Yeah.
So I could definitely say things. Well, I say things every day that are stupid and wrong. I don't care. But I could say things about Scientology that are stupid and wrong, but uh, it's a bizarre, once you get into it, it's a bizarre cult. I mean, I feel like
they don't like being called
they're
a
like,
cult.
but I feel like it's pretty mainstream that people understand it's a cult now, right? Since Leah Remini and
Yeah.
Going Clear,
Yeah.
and there's been a handful of pretty big documentaries of people who have left Scientology, spilled the beans.
Yeah.
One of the things that they say about like what makes it a cult, what's the difference between a religion and a cult? One of the hallmarks is you can't leave.
Yeah.
And so, if I invited you to church and you came to the Catholic Church
Yeah.
and you became a Catholic and you were there, and then all of a sudden you said, I'm not into this, I'm going to go be a Buddhist, I'm not going to do anything to stop you.
Yeah.
And nobody in the church is. So that's a big difference than in Scientology. If you left, I mean, an entire team, I mean, it'd be a very strong effort to almost blackmail you, do whatever they need to do to keep you involved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good soldiers, kind of like you were talking about, with actual soldiers and not dealing with, conspiracy theories in the military. A lot of the stories I heard listening to former Scientologists, it's exactly that. The church puts a lot of effort into keeping, counter information away from people and members of the church.
Mhm.
So like probably deep into this conversation, we'll get into Dave Miscavige's dad. He was bought in. He's actually the one that brought his son into Scientology. But his exit path was he accidentally stumbled onto a website that was like a kind of a debunking of Scientology website. And he goes, they would have never let me on that website. They just, the agents in Scientology didn't know that security setting had to be tripped on the piece of equipment I was using.
Wow.
So it's a concerted effort on the part of the Scientologists to defend, like when you talk about now it's kind of widely known as a cult, that's some of the commentary I've heard from Leah Remini and a couple of others, that now that the internet is getting more and more prevalent, what they call a public Scientologist would be like a hobbyist, right? That's kind of a level one. You're going to the church every weekend and you're practicing Scientology, but you still have a day job, right? And you still live in your own home and do your own thing. So you're still able to be exposed to the internet, which is, I think, why, currently it's going to be more commonly known or thought of as a cult, right?
So, well, yes. Let's go back to the beginning, though.
Sorry.
The fun thing. There's no easy way to get into this because there's literally so much wacky, I mean, truly unbelievable stories wrapped up in Scientology. Its origins and leadership. It's all the way up to Tom Cruise being the best actor in human existence. It's just, we're going to do a 2-part series on this because it's just too much to take in. So we're going to do kind of a look at who L. Ron Hubbard was and where this kind of came from. And then fun thing about it is we've already talked about Jack Parsons.
Yeah, good jumping off point.
You could go, I don't know, do you know much about his life before he became best buddies with Jack Parsons?
He has, you can go to lronhubbard.org and they've got a pretty encompassing early years slideshow.
Wait, is this Scientology website? Or
I
don't know if you would believe much in that.
Well, no, but I do like to kind of like some of these other subjects we've looked into. I do like to get into like, well, as much as
listen to both sides.
It's fun to listen to the podcasts that poke fun at them, but I also want to go and look and see, do they really say that?
Yeah.
And L. Ron Hubbard's slideshow, he was born in
Well, I only
Montana.
said that because I know that he fabricated a lot of his military career, and a lot. There's becomes a point where he obviously just makes up.
I'm so glad you brought that up.
But before that, the main thing to know about L. Ron Hubbard is that he was a prolific pulp fiction writer.
Right.
So he, before he's in the military, before he's doing much of anything. He's a writer, science fiction writer, and just pounding out these novels. He was paid by the word, so he's getting like a penny a word.
Yeah.
And he even, I heard he even was so good at writing, or not good at pumping out books. I don't think a lot of his books were very good. He even had like this state of the art typewriter that had like already like finished strokes. Words. So he had like but, to, and so like he could, I think it's pretty, a lot of people have, established that he had an amphetamine, liked amphetamines, like many people do. Yeah. So he'd amp up on amphetamines and he would just knock out these novels and pay the bills. And that's how he started out as in his life as a writer. But it's also, he continued to write his entire life. Some people think it was continued drug use, but also just maybe like a compulsive disorder kind of thing where it's like he just has to write whatever's going on. Kind of like we have to maybe play music or something. Yeah,
I think there's truth to that. He's got an active mind. Gosh, his military career. Do you know anything about that before he starts writing?
Just that he was a lieutenant commander in the Navy, and he was in charge of a boat off of the coast of Oregon and engaged in weeks-long bombing campaign against a Japanese submarine that now we realize didn't even exist. No, he was bombing a fictional submarine.
My understanding was like it was a known set of magnetic rocks. Like he calls it out on the radar, and the people that are scanning the radar with him are like, "No, those are just rocks. We already know about those." And he's like, "I'm gonna shoot them."
Yeah.
Another thing he did, so he got in trouble for that. Then he gets put in charge of another ship, and off the coast of Mexico, he shoots artillery
into Mexico.
Yeah, which we're lucky it's like a friendly neighbor, and they didn't have any people on it. So I mean, they were kind of like, they let that one go. But yeah, those are the two big points of his military career that you don't read that on LronHubbard.org.
Yeah. I just thought that was funny that it went on for so long, and he was adamant that he was bombing this Japanese submarine.
I didn't realize it was that long.
I think it was 2 weeks or something like that. And it's like, and then even now, well, not now, but after the fact, both our military and the Japanese, like everybody went to go verify, was he actually bombing a Japanese submarine? It's like there was no Japanese submarine anywhere to be seen.
Yeah.
It was just L. Ron Hubbard. You give some guys, you give them a cannon, they're just going to shoot it.
Yeah.
Any excuse they have to shoot it, they're going to shoot it.
If the only tool you have is a hammer.
Yeah, everything's a nail.
Yeah.
And especially if you're on amphetamine salts, I think you just... So
you're right. So he comes back from the war.
To bring us back to the starting point, at some point he ends up answering a newspaper ad by Jack Parsons, where he had to be a what did Jack Parsons say? No.
He was looking for gypsy type folks.
No, but he had a way of phrasing it. He said, "No one mundane, no one mundane," and I think it really piqued L. Ron Hubbard's interest, and they ended up being best friends, like really hitting it off, and had a great friendship, which is
despite the fact that L. Ron Hubbard stole his girlfriend.
Well, shortly after that, I think Parsons realized that he was a grifter and that he was not, he was conning him, and they weren't friends. But
because he stole his boat,
he stole a lot of his money.
Yeah,
so he had set up. There's a lot of things going on, but Jack Parsons, if you remember, is friends with Aleister Crowley, who's the Satanist out of England, and they're working together to put together these satanic churches, which just sounds insane, but it is what they were doing. One of them was the Order of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which was out of England, which is an occult. I don't know it just sounds weird to say it, but they were trying to, I don't know, usher in the Antichrist or something. It was really weird, bad stuff. And I don't think that L. Ron Hubbard was really into any of that. Right. I don't know exactly what the attraction to Parsons was, except maybe he thought he was an easy target for money and for taking advantage of him.
Makes sense.
But he ended up moving in, and eventually L. Ron Hubbard proposed this business model that he got Parsons, who was wealthy, to be an investor in, and dumped his entire fortune into it, I think. And it was this idea of, much like, I think at the same time you had businesses where if you bought a car, one part of the country, you could hire a driver to bring that car to you. Same thing if you bought a yacht somewhere in the world, this company would sail that yacht to you. And anyway, I don't know if you had something pulled up about it. Is that essentially what it was?
That's pretty good. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I could read what's on here, but that's a pretty good synopsis of it. It's
what was the company called?
Allied Enterprises. Looks like Parsons put up 20,000 of capital, Hubbard adding $1,200, and Northrop contributing nothing. So again, you've got Parsons puts in $20,000, Hubbard puts in just barely $1,000. And then they go on to.
I feel like that number's. I've heard a much bigger number.
I have too. This
like
is just what's in front of me. Yeah. Let's see. Hubbard and Northrop left for Florida towards the end of April. Hubbard taking with him $10,000 drawn from the Allied Enterprises account to fund the purchase of the partnership's first yacht. Weeks passed without word from Hubbard. Yeah, the story goes on. We probably went over some of this in the Parsons podcast.
Yeah.
But
he takes Sarah Northrop, Parsons' wife, and all the money, and it took about a few weeks before Parsons kind of going.
I don't think he's coming back with that.
I haven't heard anything from either of them. They were like holding hands when they left.
Yeah,
seems strange.
Yeah,
I mean, I know I'm into the sex cult stuff, but I think maybe something's going on here.
Yeah,
and eventually that all blows up, and we covered that in the other podcast.
That's
but
right.
Parsons is threatening to prosecute Hubbard, but Hubbard's now girlfriend threatens to have Parsons prosecuted for statutory rape.
Yeah,
and then Parsons just says whatever, kind of throws his hands up at the whole thing, and Hubbard gives him like a couple $1,000s back.
I think that, in the end, Parsons was able to press some kind of charges or bring some kind of a suit. But you're right. Initially, it was, not so fast, buddy. We know that you were with an underage girl because I'm that underage girl a few years ago. Quick funny side note, Sarah Northrop's in this picture in this Wikipedia page with Hubbard on a yacht. So she's just hands around his waist and they're cruising on this ship, which I like to believe is the yacht that we're talking about. And the note under the picture says it's Hubbard and Northrop aboard the schooner Blue Water 2 in Miami. So maybe that is it. The Church of Scientology has republished this photograph with Northrop airbrushed out, which I've heard more than once that, according to Scientology, this Sarah Northrop was never involved with Hubbard.
Yeah. There's a lot of that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that going on with Scientology.
He did a lot of stuff that he's real proud of, according to Scientology, that didn't happen. And then there are things like this that they'd rather you not know. So there is no Sarah Northrop in the L. Ron Hubbard story as far as Scientology is concerned.
Well, and so all of that kind of brings us up to speed with who Hubbard was. And then, he has a falling out. I believe that we could look up when Parsons blows his face off, but I think it's around 52, 53, something like that. It's about the time that Hubbard... He's no longer friends with Parsons. There's probably about a 7-8 year window where they're not close. And then he is, in the meantime, he starts working on Dianetics, which is a book that he published, I think 52 or 53, somewhere in there.
1950, I believe.
Oh, 50. Okay. Yeah. So
let's see.
He supposedly had another book
50.
that he was working on before that. I don't know if you see it anywhere in there, but it was... this was like a different, a version of that. And he had rumored that anyone who had read that other book, the predecessor to Dianetics, would literally just jump out of a window and commit suicide.
Oh, say that again.
Like I think that was the rumor that he said, like that only a few people had read it.
Yeah.
And that it was so shocking that they had immediately committed suicide.
I heard that somewhere in all the stuff I was listening to.
Can you find what the name of that was?
Yeah, I'll try.
Precursor to Dianetics.
Yeah.
But Dianetics was, you could probably read a better definition, but essentially it was one of the first it wasn't all baloney. I mean, there's a lot of psychiatry that agrees with a lot of what is in Dianetics, because he pulls from a lot of famous psychiatric research of the time. And I think it was like the first big self-help book, essentially. Any luck? Excalibur.
Was it that, or was it a document called Affirmations?
No, I think it was called Excalibur.
All right.
I'm going to have to look it up.
Cool.
It just came to me.
But I do remember this anecdote about, if you read it, you just jump out of a building.
You jump out of a window. It's too much for the human mind to take in to really understand the thetan principles or whatever.
That's right.
Anyway, so do you want to read, do you have a definition of Dianetics or a breakdown of that?
Let's see. Let's see. Cause and cure into which you... Dark Sword, Excalibur, or Science of the Mind. Is that the one you're talking about?
That's
right.
It.
That was in 49.
Don't read it, because you might just jump out of a window after you do. I'm not endorsing anyone reading that book.
Yeah, that's funny. Okay, so his first published articles in Dianetics were Terra Incognita, The Mind. Let's see. I'm trying to find you. You were looking for a kind of a...
Yeah, well, you look, I'll just kind of
set
what I think from what I understand.
Here we go.
The thing is, it was just a huge book. Like, it exploded.
Yes.
Probably the biggest book of its time.
Yeah.
And not for no good reason. It was, like I said, it had a lot of really great psychiatric research and ideas implemented in it.
Yeah, Hubbard described Dianetics as, quote, the hidden source of all psychosomatic ills and human aberration. When he introduced Dianetics to the world in the 1950s, he further claimed that the skills have been developed for their invariable cure. It was duly launched. But yeah, to your point, 28 weeks, New York Times bestseller list, huge success.
And that's an interesting part of it too, is that at the time, Hubbard, so Scientology eventually becomes very averse to psychiatry and all of that. But at that time, it wasn't. Like, he actually read a lot of psychiatric research, and he used it. It was only when the psychiatrist started to point out that this is a Ponzi scheme to make money that then all of a sudden he thinks psychiatric medicine is just
You're
baloney.
Right. Yeah, there are a lot of accounts early, like, before he gets on the scene in the 50s, of him studying. Even on that lronhubbard.org, there's an account of, like, early in his life, him, meeting somebody that was into psychoanalytics early on. And you're right. It's only when the psychiatric boards and things like that start to deny him access to certain, credibility, that all of a sudden Scientology's position is like, well, you guys are the ones that taught the Nazis how to do bad experiments, and you're the ones that are shocking people's brains.
And he was very good, or Scientology and Hubbard, they were very good at, I think, using the zeitgeist and using the zeitgeist against their enemies.
Totally.
So we'll get into more of it, but even they, when they're pushing back against federal agencies, they're doing it at a time and in a way that, even though it has nothing to do with their cause, they know the public sentiment towards the FBI is not good. And they're very savvy about how they do it, I think. Anyway, anything else on Dianetics?
Just that it was poorly received by the press and medical professions, it says. So it's interesting. Yeah, it looks like maybe the press at the time was discerning enough to go, this is kind of baloney. But the American Psychological Association criticized Hubbard's claims as not supported by empirical evidence, which is probably the beginning of Hubbard's animosity towards the psychological community. But yeah, the general public seems like
sold like crazy.
Yeah. And it makes a lot of sense. Like, I think we were talking as you were getting the equipment reset back up, but like the idea that you've got some kind of, the power is already within you to improve your life. I think that's a relatively revolutionary idea in the 50s. This idea of like self-improvement, self-help.
Yeah, well, there was no Tony Robbins. There was nothing like that. It was the first Tony Robbins. It was the first self-help, which is not, I mean, it's not bad. There's a lot of people got. We got Tom Cruise out of it.
Totally.
So
pretty great. Yeah. Feel the need.
We got John Travolta out of it. There's a lot of great.
Jenna Elfman.
Who?
Dharma and Greg. Jenna Elfman.
Yeah. There's a long list. If you're not aware, if you're somebody who's never heard of Scientology,
Giovanni Ribisi.
A lot of Hollywood actors are Scientologists, and
Beck.
a lot of Beck.
He's not one anymore. He says.
Is he not?
No, but
when did he get out?
Like 2019, he says.
Okay, so
Juliette Lewis.
It took Leah Remini to get a lot of these people out.
Yeah,
I think she did get a lot of people out. So she was on. If you don't know who she is, actress on King of Queens was her big TV show,
and Saved by the Bell.
And I didn't know she was on that.
She was in the seasons where the crew went to go work at the beach resort. That was like later episodes. Somehow she got introduced as a character in those seasons, and then I think that she was only supposed to be like a temporary character, but she's Leah Remini.
She's amazing.
She's undeniable talent. So
beautiful, funny. But she, if you don't know about her, check out. She had a TV series about it. She's given a lot of podcasts, but it's a hell of a story. She was on Joe Rogan. That's a good one. And she explains she grew up a Scientologist, and she didn't start to like wake up to the idea that this was a cult until I think Tom Cruise's wedding, and she was invited to Tom Cruise's wedding, and
Scavenger's wife wasn't there.
Yeah, there was the leader's wife wasn't there, and then she also said she'd see people drinking, and she's like, "We're not supposed to be drinking, or what's going on?" And then she'd try to narc on them because you're supposed to, but then it was, well, it's Tom Cruise, so just shut up. And she was just, I think she's such a genuine, honest person that she just kind of went like, well, you can't do that.
Yeah, she was fully bought in, and then she
bought
was
in, but she saw the BS.
Yeah, exactly.
And then she quickly, I think, I don't know how quickly it was, but I know she got out.
Yeah.
And now, I think thankfully she's a big enough star. I'm sure they tried to, burn her reputation, destroy her career, but I think she was just so famous, it was hard to. And she's so talented, it's hard to like get, that career off the rails. But they did with other people. They definitely did go to extreme lengths to, even so much as like if you did this podcast back in the early 2000s, they would sue us.
Yeah.
Just for saying anything negative about them.
Yeah, it's less that way now, it seems, but you're right. They've got a lot of lawyers on retainer, and a lot of the comment that I heard today that I thought was pretty interesting was, it's not that they've got a lot of high profile politicians on their list. You don't see a lot of politicians that go, "I'm a Scientologist and I'm proud of it," because that's probably
wasn't their thing.
That's a misstep for a politician. Scientology is pretty adept at hiring lawyers lawyers are not particularly interested in. I mean, just because they work for a Scientology doesn't mean they are Scientologists, for one. But also they put a lot of money into a lot of the organizations in Clear Lake, Florida, where their headquarters are. What is that?
Are.
So they're in tight with the mayor there, and a lot of the organizations in that town. So it's like lobbyists and things like that, kind of behind the scenes.
And I think they also made a calculated move with the Hollywood thing to go, how do we sell this religion?
Yeah.
Well, the celebrity thing was like an obvious, like, well, you got to get celebrities involved. And so they specifically set up shop in Hollywood to, it became a pretty, it was not even a secret, like just people knew that, like, being a Scientologist would open the doors for lots of gigs, lots of opportunities. They were in the business, and they would look for their people opportunities to further their career. I mean, Tom Cruise is the example of, they've set his entire career up, and they did it on purpose because, he was is a Scientologist, and what better way to sell Scientology than to have the world's most famous actor. And so, I mean, I'm sure they did lots to further his career, and at the same time, he did a lot to further the church.
Right.
So
yeah, there's a comment here in this Wikipedia that says several famous individuals became involved with Dianetics. Aldous Huxley receiving auditing from Hubbard. So even at the outset, Hubbard's game, was like, and I even heard that comment that he was quoted as saying that early on. Like, a couple things that he was quoted as saying were like, if you really want to make money, start a religion.
Yeah.
And the other comment was, and if you're going to start a religion, get somebody famous on board, like, and that's how you really get some heat
I heard
behind it.
somebody say that there was a going bet between Jack Parsons,
Oh,
L.
is that
Ron
right?
Hubbard, and Anton LaVey of who would start their own religion. Like
Okay.
these guys were back in the 40s talking about this, and I think Anton LaVey was the first one to start his own Church of Satan, his own religion. But whoever was saying it was that L. Ron Hubbard was definitely a lot more business savvy about it, because I think you only had to pay $2 to join the Church of Satan, and to become a Scientologist, you had to give them everything that you owned.
Yeah.
And then poor Jack blew his face off before he could start his own
couldn't really
religion. So, oh, white sides. Anyway, so I forget where we're going with that.
Just that it was in the 50s, it was really well received by the public.
Oh, just Dianetics. Yeah, this is before Scientology existed yet. And so it explodes. He makes a absolute fortune off this book.
Yeah. Apparently he was a great, like a dynamic speaker. So he would hold conferences and was really well received as far as that goes as well. So you've got this really charismatic figurehead with he's creative, right? He's prolifically writing all this science fiction. So I think he has a pretty active mind, probably on account of all the speed he was taking. But yeah, things are going really well for Hubbard in the 50s. Let's see. Yeah, where do we get to where we... So there's the collapse of Dianetics.
Well, where did you look up, like, I don't know if I even know the answer to this, of exactly how did Scientology start versus Dianetics? Did it start as like I think he started having like clinics and like groups session kind of stuff?
Yeah.
Because I know eventually the real push was the IRS and the taxes. And it was like Hubbard realized, I think he had $1 billion back taxes. He owed like $1 billion in back taxes.
Yes, that's true. That was, I think, somewhere around the 80s.
Yes.
He had accrued all these. He did not like paying taxes.
I think he had to fight for nonprofit.
Correct. Yeah.
From like the 70s to the 90s. It was a long case.
It's like he had it at early. The IRS had granted them nonprofit status at one point, but you're right.
It was taken away.
Throughout the 70s up through the 80s, up until 93 is when they got reinstated as a nonprofit. So there was a long window of...
One of the things, I don't know if you had that, like the origins of it, but part of Dianetics was like a process of, if you compared it to like to the Catholic Church, like going to confession, it was like, but it was a big part of their process was auditing people and using this device that was like it's not a lie detector, but it's kind of like a lie detector. Like it would just monitor your pulse and your skin, and you would go back through these sessions with an auditor who was somebody with Scientology who would, ask you questions about your childhood. And essentially, if I get it right, essentially the idea behind Scientology is that we've all experienced like past traumas, both in this life and in other past lives, that cause us to not be our full potential or something like that. And you have to kind of go back and deal with those.
Yeah, you got to clear your
going clear is where that comes from.
Yeah.
And don't they're all called thetans, right? Like we're all thetans.
Thetan is, it's like a godlike creature. And if you're ready to dive into the really weird stuff,
go with it.
Yeah, I believe you get to level OT3. So as if you and I walked into a Scientology church today, we start out level 0 or level 1. You got to progress. But they don't tell you about the god Xenus until level OT3. That's kind of like you've been in it for a while. And like you said, through through great expense of your own, you put in all this money to take these courses, and you've paid for all these audits and things like that.
You level up, and as you level up, they give you more information about the secrets of the universe, and then you go higher and higher and higher.
Eventually, they hip you to the story of this god named Xanus, which in a lot of the videos I watched where like a Scientologist got cornered, and when they get asked about Xanus, they get real touchy and like standoffish. They don't want to tell you about it. And I think that's because they know it is received as like a very kooky thing to say. But apparently in another universe, an alternate universe, Xanus needed to dispel of all of these godlike creatures, which surprisingly, they looked exactly like us in the 1950s and 60s. It was their world looked just like ours at the same time that Hubbard was telling people this in the 1950s and 60s. So he rounds all these people up under the guise of some kind of a tax audit, brings them all in, and he injects what is it, glutamine? I forget.
Yeah, something that freezes their heart.
All of these, freezes them all up. He puts them down to the base of all these volcanoes, and then shoots off hydrogen bombs to explode the volcanoes. Now all of these thetans are released out into the
cosmos,
and they got no place to go. So when you are born, they go, there's a meat sack we can jump on. And that's what they do. Now, unfortunately for you, what that means is you're carrying around all their psychological baggage from that planet
eons.
That they were, all the past lives of all these other thetans. You're dragging that around with you. So if you have some kind of weird, like, if you have negative self-talk, that's probably because there's a thetan hanging on to you that, thinks real badly of themselves and has made some decisions they're not so proud of. And this is what these audits and that e-meter that you were just talking about, that's what it's designed to help you suss out. And so the way I've heard it explained more than once in all these different interviews is if I'm auditing you, we're sitting across the table, you pick up the hand readers, they look like soup cans, and I ask you, is there anything that I think that it's basically, it's very open-ended. It's kind of a, what comes
like
to
what's
mind?
your earliest memory kind of thing, and you go,
it.
I remember being in the woods or something.
Right.
Inevitably it comes to some sort of trauma.
Right.
And if you're a famous celebrity, they're writing all this down so that if you ever decide to leave, they have a book saying all these things that you really don't want people to know, because they essentially
that time you pooped your pants in first grade. You don't want anybody to know about that, do you?
So I guess that's what my point was, is as through this process, it's also a convenient way of documenting a lot of kooky, weird, embarrassing things on all of your people. Well, then they obviously just use that to keep, Tom Cruise wants to leave. Well, you can't, because, we got this book with every dirty thing you ever did in your entire life, which is probably none, because Tom Cruise is just better than the rest of us. But
well, I think we all know that to be true. That was, in all of this research, that was possibly one of the hardest things to deal with, was reconciling my love for Tom Cruise with all the accounts of Scientology and that he's so tightly involved with it.
It goes a long way. People in this life, especially now, complain about inequity all the time. And, they look to all kinds of different, race and class and gender, whatever you want. And, nobody talks about beauty, you know what I mean? And like how unfair it is to be not beautiful.
Totally.
And do you think you would, Tom Cruise is an example of, he is, I think at this point it's pretty obvious he's done some pretty awful, he's been a pretty bad guy as far as some relationships, using basically indentured servitude as like a lot of these people from the church, just basically being his slaves all the time. And no one calls him out on it. He's not once has anybody ever done a story saying, why did you do these awful things, or, why did you treat these people? And, maybe it's not true, but I think a lot of it is he's just so damn beautiful and so, nice to watch on a screen that you just give him a pass. That's inequity.
Yeah, we are not all created
if we did any of those things, nobody would give us a pass.
he's just so darn likable. I
Yeah.
mean, I've talked about it more than once, but beginning of Maverick, the reboot for Top Gun,
Hmm.
it's just Tom Cruise sitting in a director's chair looking at the camera, telling you personally, Dante, I'm so glad that you're here to see this Top Gun movie. I am really excited about it, and I just want you to have the best time watching this movie. And just now, as I described it, I got chills again thinking about Tom Cruise telling me how excited he was that I was going to watch Maverick. And there's something about that guy's charisma, his warmth, and yeah, his beauty. Like, he's just such an awesome dude.
And he's just all in all the time. You know, maybe
Totally.
that's
Yeah.
part of it too,
Yeah.
is like he's a true believer and you just pick that up from him. People like that. People like, you
I
know,
really believe when he said it, like he was excited for me to see Top Gun, the Maverick, because he was so excited about how great it turned out. Like he was a fan of it,
yeah.
not because he thought he was so great, just like,
And
isn't this
I don't mean to
exciting?
pretend like I know anything. I don't know Tom Cruise. He could be amazing. I'm just basing on researching this church and
Uh-huh.
listening to what people who have worked with him have said about him, you know, specifically from the Scientology side of things. I know that there's probably a lot of Hollywood people that have worked with, like, he strikes me as the kind of guy who's like, yeah, as long as you're not in his way, he's probably great, you know,
Totally. Yeah.
probably the nicest guy in the world. But it kind of sounds like if you cross him at all, it's, you know, you're in trouble.
Well, did you watch the interview with him and Matt Lauer?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that one gets a little weird. There's another one with him on like a 60 Minutes. It's a
Yeah.
British guy
Yeah.
interviewing
Yeah.
him. I
Yeah.
forget the name of the guy that's doing the interview.
I think he was
But it
Australian.
was an
Yeah.
Australian guy. Okay, it gets a little awkward. But what's funny is like, yeah, like the interviewer kind of rights the ship. It's like, whoa, Tom, I didn't mean to get get sideways with you.
Yeah.
And then like the footage shows them wrapping the interview up, and Tom's like, that was great, man, thanks. And the interviewer's like, it seemed like you got a little upset there for us for a minute. And Tom Cruise is like, we did, but it's great now,
Yeah.
thanks, man.
Yeah.
And you're like, yeah, as long as you stay out of his way, you're in good shape.
Huh. Well, I don't know. I'm not as beautiful as Tom Cruise, so I don't know what it's like
Well,
to have a Hollywood
few
career. But
people are.
um, that could be, we could do that on the back half. There's we wanted to get through Hubbard
Right.
this podcast, and we'll get into more like maybe modern day Scientology on the
Yeah.
next podcast. But
Did you want to hear any kind of Scientology origin?
yeah, like, did you find like the actual origins of when it started?
This is from the Scientology website. So founder L.R. Hubbard was a science fiction novelist said to have been intrigued by the film industry. At the time that he founded Scientology, he was writing in Hollywood, hoping to further his entertainment career. In 1969, the church opened its first celebrity center, a church that is open to the public but meant for artists, business leaders, athletes, and other notable persons who may be interested in participating in the church. And
So that's what I
perhaps,
was thinking. It started as like
yeah,
a clinic, like
exactly, yeah,
like specifically directed at.
yeah,
And I think some of that was a cynical move by Hubbard to uh, get, you know, brand ambassadors kind of thing
totally,
that
yeah,
would represent it. But I think he also just loved the arts. Like
yeah.
he had a lot of musicians. I think he was in a band and like
Oh, is
a
that right?
musician. I forget the name of it, but I think he wasn't a creative person himself, obviously, and he liked to be around creative people and liked to take their money and do all kinds of wacky
Well, I
stuff with
think
it.
when you talk about brand ambassador, he really seemed to have this idea of. Uh, I've heard some accounts of him being a hypnotist, but yeah,
That would make sense.
yeah, he really seemed to have this idea of like holding up what people want. And here, when you talk about, hey, this is a group for business leaders, for artists, for creatives, like even if you vocationally are a shipping receiving manager, you may think of yourself as a creative or like you're an aspiring entrepreneur. So
Mm-hmm.
like all like when you talk about like the beginning of self help or like uh self improvement, that sort of stuff. Yeah, this is like, even if you're not vocationally an artist or an actor, you may think of yourself as like, well, I'd like to be. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I want to get involved with this if that can
Carrot and the
take me.
stick.
Yeah, exactly. Um, man, so he seemed to know what people wanted, and he also seemed to know, like when you talk about his business savvy, um, I don't think he was great with money. Like he's not somebody you
He
want.
blew his fortune.
He,
The money he
yeah.
made off Dianetics. That's one of the things that's weird is people don't really know what he spent his money on too. Like he had a fortune from the Dianetics, and he didn't really buy real estate with it. He didn't really he just blew through it in like an insane way, like just buying. I mean, I'm sure the amphetamines played a role in that, but
Okay, yeah,
just,
that could be.
spent a lot of money in a very short amount of time.
Yeah, he's not someone I would want for a CPA, but he is a good CEO in terms of like coming
Yeah.
up with culture and direction and, vision for like what the forward facing part of your organization is going to be. Um, Man, and he's savvy as far as like, do you know anything about how he left his third wife out to dry with this?
I feel like I've heard it. I don't remember.
Uh, Let me see what it's
Was
called.
he had a wife originally in Oregon and a daughter that he just abandoned,
yeah.
and he moved when he went to Pasadena with Jack Parsons.
Then he
and then he married Sarah Northup.
Yeah.
And
They split
whatever
up,
happened with her, she just split at some point.
I forget how that ended.
Anyway, then who was the third?
Oh, divorce from her. Yeah, sorry. So just I forgot that there was a window of time where
Well, he was double married to the
well,
Oregon woman and
that's
Sarah.
right, because Sarah gets pregnant. No, wait. He's married to Sarah, then he starts up the Sea Org, and I think that's about the time he impregnates this third woman who he becomes married to. But while he's married to Sarah, Jack Parsons' ex-girlfriend, uh, they get into a bunch of arguments, and he takes their baby.
Oh yeah,
to
I remember
Cuba,
this.
And he's calling Sarah up.
And he says that she's dead.
Yeah, he's saying the baby's dead. I've thrown her in the river or whatever. And this is of course really upsetting to the mother. And then he would call back a few days later and be like, that's not actually what happened. The baby's fine. And then he'd call back a few days later and be like, no, but seriously, now the baby is dead. And like he kind of kept this just to keep her in this constant state of nuts. Then he kidnaps Sarah Northup one night and drives her all around, I believe is all around LA. And he's taken her from hospital to hospital trying to get her admitted as a psychiatric patient. He's telling the doctors,
my gosh, I didn't know that.
She's had a mental break. And the doctors keep just going like, she seems fine to me. I mean, she's upset with you.
Yeah.
Right. But otherwise she seems pretty together. Let's see.
It's those damn amphetamines.
Northup filed for divorce on April 23rd, 1951, charging Hubbard with extreme cruelty. So probably in light of all the stuff
and I think I
just
remember reading about in order to have her drop all the, like, she was gone to the authorities about the daughter and everything. To get the daughter back, she had to write a letter. And it was like this insane letter where she was like, L. Ron Hubbard's the smartest person in the world and he's the kindest. And like, it was just this obvious, like crazy narcissist thing to do. But I don't know if it was so he would know, okay, now you're, not going to come after me for kidnapping our kid and saying that I killed her,
You talk about things that are kind of like, it's probably a cult if. A lot of accounts in Scientology
it's probably a cult if there's a blood trough in the floor. I'm just saying.
That's a good one. Yeah. Another one that came to mind when you were talking earlier, what was you said what was your first qualifier?
Well, you can't leave.
You can't leave. The other one that came to mind when you said that was you're constantly in these stories of people that came out of Scientology, all these stories of disconnection, which is a real parallel to a lot of other cult stories where, you can't leave. And the next thing we're going to tell you is you can't have any contact with your family or anybody else outside of this organization. But the other one is, oh man, I lost my train of thought.
You're in a cult if...
What was the last one I was going to?
They take all your money.
That's,
If they have Kool-Aid.
Well, now I forgot where I was headed with that. That's a bummer. Anyway, while Hubbard is married to Sarah Northup, she's filing for divorce. Mary Sue becomes pregnant, and marries LRH in 1952. And this was to be his third and final wife. She was like kind of his ride or die as far as like she was.
Didn't she end up going to prison for him?
Yeah, that is what I wanted to get into.
Operation Snow White.
Because I was kind of that's it.
All right.
Yeah,
This is where it's going to get interesting.
Picking it back up. Yeah. So
we've established Scientology. We've given you a little bit of background on it. It becomes a phenomenon. It's huge in Hollywood, and then it starts to have, I don't know when it lost its nonprofit status, at some point it does, and starts to have trouble. There's certain people that Hubbard doesn't like, psychiatrists being one of them, the other being the IRS.
That's right.
He gets hit with this $1 billion back taxes thing. And, like the military minded guy that he is, they start launching, their own operations to try to, cover Scientology's butt and make sure that they keep moving forward. And the first one was with this thing called Operation Snow White.
Yeah.
That's not a government or an agency. That was their operation that involved, I think, like 1,000 people, Scientologists legitimately infiltrating government agencies in the United States to specifically spy and do whatever they could to save the Church of Scientology.
Yeah.
So it's like 500 or 1,000. I can't remember the number, but it's a lot. It's like
up to 5,000 covert agents.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So it'd be people like they would go and just work for the IRS. While they're also spying on the IRS case about the Scientology, even so much so that I think even in the when they're going to court with the IRS, like they had a spy on the inside at the IRS feeding them information about what was going to be happening in the case against them. Yeah,
that Necronome podcast that I'm always talking about gives a pretty good recount of exactly that, the way that they get some Scientology agents go in, infiltrate the IRS, and like by the time they're in the middle of all these court proceedings, you've got moles just everywhere.
Agencies all throughout the government, and it's I mean, they even have operations within that operation going on, like Operation Cat. Did you hear about that?
No, but there's another one here, Operation Freakout. There's another one. The one that really caught my attention was the one involving the journalist, but that's
Operation Freakout.
Well,
that was the one with an author. She had written a book that was critical of Scientology.
She was a Holocaust survivor that went on to get into research in Scientology. But I don't want to distract from what we're talking about as far as these, because this Operation Snow White, what's so interesting about it is, like, by the time the FBI gets pulled into this, I mean, it becomes like the largest FBI case that they've had, as far as like when they've been infiltrated. So, I mean, my goodness, pretty ambitious Scientology.
Yeah. And again, they kind of played off of the zeitgeist and the sentiment of, like, people didn't like the FBI at that time. And so it was smart to, like, I think the public, you say, oh, they screwed the FBI on something, and the public go, good. So it's pretty wild.
They ended
up settling, some of them going to jail, some of them.
Well, and specifically, like you said, the thing that struck me was they have what they call in Scientology the Guardian's Office, which is the ones that executed this Operation Snow White. Hubbard was wise enough not to put his name on the Guardian's Office. Instead, he's like, "Hey, hon, why don't you head up this Guardian's Office?
I got a job for you."
Yeah. So, and like, around late 70s, early 80s, when all this comes to light, his wife is on the hook.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the government is not going to take it easy on somebody that just pulled the stunt like this, right? So she's the one that gets prosecuted for all this stuff, among a bunch of other Scientologists, I believe. But it just, like, I was listening to this passively at work, and then when they mentioned that Mary Sue Hubbard was indicted and convicted, I was like, wait a minute, his wife, he set her up, like, for all of this stuff. Yeah, he did.
Well, he did seem perfectly okay with, like any narcissist, just using everyone around him to get whatever he wanted.
Absolutely.
And you were just a pawn in a game of L. Ron Hubbard's, life and fantasies.
Yeah, it was crazy. It feels like we're
probably rapping because he dies in 86, I think. So
yeah.
he's
So, a couple things to mention, particularly if we're going to be getting into Miscavige for the next part, is just that. Yeah, by the time L. Ron Hubbard's end of life and end of his active reign on Scientology, he's in hiding for from 1980 up through the last
and then
few
he
years of
used
his
the
life.
Sea Org to hide. So he's
Yeah,
like
he's
out at
just sitting
sea
on.
where he can't be.
Yeah, he's hard to serve papers to. He's hard to track down to bring in for any kind of legal proceedings. He starts taking his name off of all of the filings, all of the Scientology operations. He's not technically L. Ron Hubbard's technically not associated with that organization, like in name at least. And for the next episode, keep in mind his communication with all of his administration and stuff for the church is limited, and one of the main focal kind of conduits for communication is David Miscavige. So that puts David Miscavige in a really prime opportunity. But anyway, yeah, he's in hiding. He's out on the ocean. By this time, he's racked up like $100 billion tax bill of back taxes.
Oh my gosh!
So it is very much in Scientology's interest to get themselves into a nonprofit.
And they eventually do
certification. Yeah,
it's a very strange that they actually do that. I heard. I think Mark on that Un-American or American, not Un-American. Sorry, Mark. Untold American Stories, not Un-American. He was saying it's kind of like the opposite of the Catholic Church today, in that like it's the smallest religious organization with the most money.
Yeah.
Like they have over $3 billion in assets right now, and they have less than 25,000 members.
Right.
So it's this weird.
It's a weird disparity because according to Scientology, they're growing leaps and bounds, and they're constantly building new buildings.
Nobody really believes those numbers.
But then,
it's like those Chinese cities they keep building.
Exactly. Anybody that's not Scientologist says what you just said. So they only got like 20,000 members. One other, we talk about Jack Parsons, Northrop. We talk about, these weird Operation Snow Whites. And then just as like kind of a last little caveat is Jolly West's name comes up in this story too.
That's true, because this is one of the good things that Jolly West did. Right, yeah. Is that he was very hard on the Scientologist, and they hated him for it.
That's right. Yeah.
God, what a weird jumble of characters.
I was listening to that Ted Koppel interview, and about an hour into it, David Miscavige calls out Jolly West, and I was like, "Whoa, did I just hear him say?" Yeah, so that's an interesting little...
And that's because Jolly West, he specialized in hypnosis and MK Ultra stuff, but also in cults. Yeah, and I think there was there's several famous ones that he went after, but obviously it was probably 70s, like around the church hearing times, where he started to go after.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder if that was done to kind of throw the attention off of, you have these church hearings going on. There's a lot of people talking about MK Ultra and this thing, and then you think Jolly West is probably looking around going, man, I got to find. I don't want to get hung up on this MK Ultra. I know, I'll go after Scientology, and then they'll be too busy yelling at me about that.
It's funny. He Jolly West joins up with the State Board of Psychology or Psychiatry in Oklahoma because they tried to kick Scientology's drug rehab facility out of Oklahoma. So Jolly West, having been here in Norman and killing the elephant, he
I know all about Oklahoma.
He returns a few years later and he says, "Guys, sorry about the elephant, but I want to serve on this board so we can keep these kooky Scientologists out." I believe, if I read the website correctly, that that NORCOM facility is active in Oklahoma now. But
that's the Scientology place?
Yeah, it's a Scientologist rehab facility.
They don't call it Scientology rehab. It's called
correct.
Norcom.
Yeah, it's just called Norcom. But yeah, the origin of that is Scientology. But Jolly West fought the good fight on that one to try and keep it out of Oklahoma with the Oklahoma State Board of Psychiatry, which, like, what a small world. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, it's almost too strange to be a coincidence.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. I thought, like, yeah, I bet he was looking for something to throw people off, and just don't start talking about that damn elephant. They start talking about why exactly did you need to give the elephant LSD? What exactly? Yeah, don't go there.
Shh. Look at L. Ron Hubbard. Do you see the stunts he's pulling?
You think I'm weird? You think giving LSD to an elephant? Look what these guys in California are doing. Have you ever been audited? Do you know what that is? Yeah. Okay, well.
Man, I'll tell you, some of the, like you were saying earlier, the audits and the beginning pieces of, like, hey, you can provide your own solutions in a lot of ways, or you could be more creative, or you can be more successful. That part of it is really appealing, and that's what a lot of these accounts from Scientologists, like reformed Scientologists.
Well, no doubt that Scientology, like we said, gave us Tom Cruise. Like it fixed a lot of people's lives as far as people with problems, and it did a lot of good things for a lot of people. It just went bad, or it was always bad, or for some people it went bad. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure a lot of Scientologists would say really positive things about their experience with Scientology. So, I mean, as long as you, kind of like we said, as long as you're not on the wrong side of Tom Cruise, it's great.
Yeah.
You just don't.
Sounds like the way to go is be a public one. Like you keep your day job, you keep your family. You just go there on the weekends.
Yeah.
But once they start talking to you about OT3, that's when it starts getting dicey.
I don't know exactly how it plays into, but I know somebody said that if you go into looking at the origin stories of, like, their origin stories of Scientology, we could get into some of this when we get into the Masons podcast, but there's weird, like L. Ron Hubbard, probably from his experience with Parsons and Aleister Crowley, and he pulls a lot from, like, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and pulls a lot from the OTO. And there's a lot of, to me, it's just weird that these stories all cross, and it's all goes back to Satan. Yeah. It goes back to these weird occult beliefs, and they're not like, it's just weird that it's not like, it's not like they're praying to Pokemon. Like, they're, you know what I mean? Like, it always goes back to demons and fallen angels, and very like old, even like Egyptian myths and stuff. And it could just be, conveniently using it to explain your kooky theta, take on reality. But I don't know. I just think it's in the same way. You can look at a lot of the Masonic ideas and teachings, and at first glance, it seems like a good idea. But, you get deeper into it and you find the blood trough, and you go, well, I don't know.
Maybe maybe not what I was saying, or where I lost my point on cults. But that's another kind of, like, striking point to me, is like, it might be a cult if they're not open and transparent with everything that they believe at the outset. Like,
or they have secrets. Yeah,
like in the Catholic Church, like you said. Let's say I go to the Catholic Church for a few weeks, and I say, I decide I want to be a Buddhist. You guys go, okay, no problem, we'll catch you later. Or maybe I say, hey, I'm really into this Catholic Church thing. Is this all of the Bible? Then the answer would be like, yeah, this is all of it. And, like,
they'd give you the catechism, and they say,
but it's not like I can't get the catechism now. Right?
You don't have to pay anything for it. Yeah. No, that would be a point where you have to you have to level up in a cult. If you went to Scientology, the way you'd say, like, well, what's the real deal here? In a normal religion like Catholicism, you'd say, well, here's the catechism, just read it, and that's it. There's nothing else to it.
Secret information.
Using secret information about the religion to extract money, or, I don't know, use people in some other way. That'd probably it'd be a cult if they don't tell you without taking all your money or something.
Yeah. So if you're listening to this and you've hit like 2 or 3 out of these 5 bullet points.
Just saying.
And also probably you're not listening to this because the cult leader wouldn't let you listen to this.
It would be wild if somebody called us one day and said, I left the Church of Scientology after hearing your podcast.
That would be especially wild given the frenetic nature of this conversation. Because again, I have probably 20 window tabs open on my computer right now. And that was, I mean, it's been that way for the last 3 or 4 days. I've just been checking other, all these weird accusations we're throwing around are corroborated on more than one place. It's not just one. Oh man, yeah. Next episode we got to talk about this websites they make to demonize the people that jump ship on them. Oh,
shoot, I was going to say something as you said that. Oh, totally unrelated. Before we sign off, my son's baseball team, 8-year-old baseball team, we had a game last night and we just crushed them in a blowout. It was one of those, you're waiting for the other coaches to get kind of upset at some point that you're because I've seen that too, where even if it's obvious, it's just one team is way better than the other, nothing personal, but this team was great they were just super, they got it. They even wanted to play to the last inning, and they wanted to, even though it was 18-0, great sports. And the coach came up to me afterwards. His name was Jason. I don't know his last name, but he was like, Dante and the Hawks. Hey. I was like, oh, and he's like, hey, is Dave and Ted still playing with you? And I was like, yeah, or it's not a band anymore, but yeah, it was pretty cool. Cool. He was a fan back in the day.
Wow.
Don't know why I just thought of that. Yeah. But Jason appreciates your music.
Totally.
He did. But
that's great.
Maybe you like Bird Dogs too.
Yeah.
So anyway, very good. Thank you everybody for listening to the Conspiracy Dad podcast. We will pick this back up on the next one and talk in part 2 of Scientology. And until then, you guys take it easy.